Good morning, ladies and germs. This is your Demon Scat, New Hampshire and Coronavirus update. Let's talk about New Hampshire first. Wrote a rather long article about this morning. You may want to read it if you're interested in the text side. If you're more into the podcast thing, then listen up because here it is. So last night, Sanders and butt plug, as I've dubbed him, essentially ran away with the show. The so-called shock was that Klobuchar had a good showing. I could have predicted that. Wouldn't have been very hard to do. Think about the field and the electorate, folks. Okay, so and then think about the Democrat Party in general and the people in it. Okay, not just the party, not the Nancy Pelosi's, but the average proll that goes to the polls and votes. If you are one of those people that thinks that socialism sucks because everywhere it's been tried, it has failed, but you are not a Christian, all right? We'll just leave it at that. Who do you vote for in the Democrat Party? Because you're not a Republican in that situation. Why? Because the Republican Party has become guns, gays, God. As I pointed out back when the whole Tea Party thing blew up in everyone's face, after being told that this was going to be, that tea, by the way, was not just an allusion to Boston. It stood for taxed enough already. Yeah, fiscal rectitude. Right, that's what the Tea Party was about. And yet, very quickly, turned into guns, gays, and God. Okay, fine. That's what people want to do. That's what people want to do. That's what the powers that be wanted to see happen, because that's how you take a nascent political movement and you neuter it and make it ineffective. Because God forbid, you don't want a really effective new political movement, do you? No, that could be bad, especially if all those establishment people have been butt raping you to the tune of $3 trillion a year in the healthcare system. Yeah, that would be a very negative thing. And oh, by the way, if you start focusing on the fiscal, you'll eventually wind up there, because when you look at the monthly Treasury statements, that's where the money's being spent. The people in power in Washington, D.C. know this. The people in the medical establishment know this. People at your local hospital know this. Your doctor knows this. All of these people, by the way, are scammers. I know everybody hates, they hate the scamming and the surprise medical bill, but they love the guy in the white coat who, when they have a sore throat, gives them an antibiotic even though it's worthless because it's a viral infection, and sends them home and says, oh, here, have some hot toddy. Everyone thinks Marcus Welby. What they ought to be thinking about is Jeff Dahmer, because that's kind of sort of what you got nowadays in the medical profession. Pretty much all of them, by the way. And for those who say, oh, no, my doctor's dead. Yeah, okay. I've heard that one before. Yeah, I really have. And talk to me about the practice software that's gone into a lot of these places that actually makes recommendations for drugs, including opioids. And oh, by the way, guess what? The company that made the software gets a kickback. The Googleization of medical practice software. Think about this. Selling advertising, essentially, okay, whether disclosed or not. Did you, as a third party, when I go on Google, I know that people can pay for placement. And I look at Twitter. Twitter has this thing that says promoted on all the tweets that somebody paid to show me. How do you know what your doctor was? You don't, right? What's the disclosure? You're supposed to be the customer, so how come you're the one that gets it in the ass? But no, we can't, Hey, listen, you can resist advertising. You can make your own decisions about it, provided you know what's going on. But, this is how we have to, and what has Trump done? Think about this. He knows, because he's run a business for, 3 decades now? 4 decades? He knows good and damn well what's going on in this regard. This is not a shock, okay, at all. He can't possibly be immune to this or not know about it. Good God, I saw it coming, and this was in the 1990s when I was running MCS. So don't tell me he doesn't know. He most certainly does know. What he has figured out is that if you print money, if you goad the Fed into doing it and you goad the federal government into spending a deficit, you can hide the impact of it for a while, which is all he cares about. He wants to get through his second term. Well, he's not going to. But, the most important thing is that he gets through the election coming up in November, right? And he probably will get away with that because the fiscal collapse isn't going to come this year. The odds are grossly against that happening. So what does the common person do? Well, if you're a little on the radical side and you're white, you vote for Sanders. If you're white, you're a little on the radical side, and you're gay, you vote for Mayor Pete. 13% of the American population is black. Black people won't vote for Pete. I mean, he's a real racist. At least that's the record from his time as mayor. Okay. And then you have Bloomberg, who just blew his own brains out in terms of actually winning the general. It doesn't matter whether he gets the nomination. What matters is who can actually win in November. Okay. Both Mayor Pete and Bloomberg will get one black vote, maybe. And it'll be a black cat that voted from the grave. It won't be a black human. Bloomberg blew his own brains out by speaking the truth. And I do it all the time. It's one of the reasons that, if I ran for president, I get 3 black votes. The FBI, by the way, confirms both Bloomberg's and, my look at it. As by the way, hey, jackass for Chicago, if you want to see the stats for Chicago. So he's right. 95% of the murders are committed by minorities. And yet, the minority population in most major cities is about 2/3. It is for Chicago, probably is for New York. I haven't looked at New York's demographic stats in detail, but I have looked at them for Chicago. And Chicago's about 1/3 black, about 1/3 Hispanic, about 1/3 white. It's been that way for a long time. All right. So the racial population makeup of black people is roughly 3 times what it is on a concentration basis in America as a whole. And yet, 95% of the murders. Okay? If they stop murdering, Chicago would be one of the safest places. I mean, it would be just as safe as rural America. Oh, damn, isn't that inconvenient? Yeah. But here's the other bad news. Everyone says, those white people, they shoot black people. Well, actually, no. Black people shoot white people about twice as often. But in both cases, that argument's a dog whistle, a racist dog whistle. And the reason is, the vast majority of the time, the people who get shot by minorities are also minorities. So the real crime here, the real nasty, is that the facts are that black people are murdering black people. You'd think that if anybody had half a brain in their head, you'd want to stop that. And if you were trying to appeal to minorities as a person running for president or any other political office, you would put your effort there. Well, that's kind of what Mayor Mike said, Mini Mike, whatever you want to call him. But, oh man, he's done as a presidential candidate as a result of that's been unearthed. Although what he said is accurate. Now, listen, the guy's a prick and I don't like him. He's a monopolist, which is how essentially every billionaire got their money. And he's a thug. And he's a rich thug on top of it, which makes him dangerous. But, it is what it is. So then the other thing we got going on here is that, the Sanders breakout, though, is not surprising. Look at the demographics in New Hampshire, all right? Yeah, okay. So you can explain Sanders. You can explain butt plug. How about Klobuchar? You want to know why Klobuchar got 25% of the vote? Or 20% or whatever it was? You know why she came in third with a really strong showing? You're not going to like my explanation. She doesn't have anything you can point at that marks her as a racist. She doesn't have anything that you can point at that marks her as a creep, all right, unlike Biden. And she's got a vagina. And by the way, half the people in the country, approximately, are women. It's the same reason people voted for Hillary in many cases. It had nothing to do with her competence or anything else, because clearly, by God, she wasn't as corrupt as hell. But she had a vagina, and therefore they voted for her. So this is, of course, this doesn't work so well when you get into South Carolina, and people look and say, but she's a white woman. yeah, she'll probably do okay in South Carolina. But if you think she's going to be nearly as strong there, no, she's not. Biden's candidacy is on life support. Warren's finished. Okay, she was almost in her backyard and did poorly. So what are you going to end up with? Well, Sanders, socialism. When do people turn to socialism? When they get screwed by the ruling class and are deliberately lied to and obfuscated and told that it's all those evil rich people. And so they vote for socialism. They never bother to pay attention to the fact that Bernie has been in Congress essentially through the entire time that all this rape has been going on in the financial system and in the medical system. And he hasn't done a damn thing about it. And his solution is more government. How about enforce the law? Oh, no, we can't have that. That would mean that, all those, that 20% of the population, boy, they'd really dislike us that they never provide a single second of care to a single person, but they make $100,000 a year ripping you off through medical coding and all this other garbage. And in sales, why do you need sales in the medical system? You ever think about that? Why do you need salespeople in a medical environment? Excuse me? I thought medical practice was supposed to be about actually understanding what's wrong with people and doing the right thing, not about how much money you can make. Never mind. Okay. Let's talk coronavirus because, I could spend the entire podcast on New Hampshire and the stupidity. Folks, we are now outside the window for this bend back upward, this exponential trend to continue. In fact, in China, okay, we now have a 3-day period where the slope of the curve is bending downward. It's still going up. Don't kid yourself. But we now have a second inflection. We have that first inflection point was started to bend downward. Remember, I said that was potentially a false god. We had a couple days of it. We're now at 3 days where the bend, the second phase of that, in other words, the first deflection downward occurred. Now we got a second deflection downward, which is now 3 days into it. 2 more, and we should see, if this is a pattern, we should see it continue, a third one start. And again, as I said, this implies that containment may be occurring in China. Do I trust the Chinese numbers? No. Multiply by 10. But is it likely that they're going to be able to continue to play that game on a constant basis and yet curve fit to a sufficient level to convince everybody else? No, they're not. And where the problem is going to come from here, though, is that once they all go back to work, they may see the spike come back the other way. Never mind that you've still got all of these other nations, all of whom are part of this Asian triangle, all of whom have the same sanitation kind of problems that they have in China, and yet all of whom have really shitty medical surveillance systems, essentially non-existent. We're not going to hear about those for another month, probably, but my guess is the breakouts are going to come there. All right, the other thing is this Petri dish cruise ship. God, as I pointed out, where do you think this comes from, guys? How could you reasonably train and expect on a protocol basis isolation of a person? You isolate people to their rooms in a cruise ship, but you have to bring them food and you have to take away their plates. In other words, things have to go in and out of that space. And the sanitation of that from the time that it is picked up after it's been in the room until it gets back into wherever it needs to be, taken care of and processed, put through the dishwasher, whatever you have, must be maintained. There is no possible way that you can do that in a cruise ship. You can't do it to the degree that you need to be able to do it. And secondly, you have people on these boats. You may have flush toilets there, but that does not mean those people are actually used to using them in a Western way. In other words, they wipe their butts with a piece of toilet paper, they flush it, and then they wash their hands. They don't use their ass as a thing to be wiped with their fingers, which then ends up in their food, which then ends up on the plate and now goes back down and cross-contaminates other things before it goes into the dishwasher. Folks, cruise ships are a problem anyway because the crews are not from Western nations. And as I pointed out, this is because of the Jones Act and because it's cheaper. So, Carnival Cruise Lines and Royal Caribbean, all these guys, they don't hire Americans. They don't hire Germans. They don't hire English people. They hire people from all over the world, most of whom come from very poor, backward, non-white people, good sanitation nations, essentially all of them. And yes, they train them, but their culture is not ours. Cruise ships have been known for a long time to be a hotbed for viral outbreaks, especially norovirus. That this thing has gotten going in there is no shock. That the cruise lines have not shut down is also no shock because they're all for-profit, publicly listed companies. Carnival Cruise and Royal Caribbean, do you think they're going to just say, we're going to kill all of this until this thing goes away? Of course not. It would destroy their stock prices. It would destroy their companies, and they know it. Well, why don't you just ban everybody from an Eastern nation, basically the entire East Asia area, from going on those cruises, and you don't sail there in that part of the world? Well, they're not going to do that either. That's racist. Well, actually, it's not. How about we don't have any crew members from places that had... Now we're going somewhere dangerous, aren't we? But that's not going to happen either. That would raise costs. And man, never mind. It's racist. Yeah, okay. Viruses are not racist, folks. Got bad news for you. Sanitation isn't racist either. It just happens to be fact or lack thereof. We still have no breakout in America. We still have no breakout in any other country that has Western sanitation. None. Those of you that want to run around with your hair on fire and make excuses for it, you go right ahead. Those of you that are trying to sell masks or subscriptions to your breathless podcast or whatever report you're publishing, you go right ahead. The facts are that I see no evidence to support breakouts in those places where there is Western sanitation and Western standards. No evidence for it at all. We dumped a bunch of people into New Jersey off a cruise ship. They have dispersed throughout the world and throughout the United States. The window is going to close this weekend on the first batch of them that should be starting to become symptomatic at a degree that they seek medical care. We're either going to see a breakout or we're not. And someone asked, well, why are you looking at New Jersey specifically? I'm not looking at New Jersey. I'm saying the majority of the people who came in on that boat probably were U.S. citizens and probably are dispersed throughout the United States. And that means if that group of people, where there was a fear, is going to cause a breakout, it will happen here, and it will happen about 5 days after those people are discharged from the boat. Give it a couple more for them to get seriously ill enough to go seek medical attention of some kind, at which point people start to question. We haven't seen it. The breakout here in the U.S. has not occurred. That doesn't mean there isn't going to be a case here and there. There is. But remember, the whole point behind viral transmission or any other disease is that R naught has to be greater than 1.0. For everybody that is sick, they have to infect more than one person. Otherwise, eventually, the infection rate becomes just a nuisance. Someone gets it here, someone gets it there, but on average, they fail to infect another person before they either die or recover. That's the test. When you reach that point, the rate of transmission goes down. And eventually it becomes essentially nuisance level stuff. All right. The other thing is, for all of you people still running around with this 11% fatality, that's bullshit. Okay. 11% of the people who end up intubated in a hospital, well, I believe that. What percentage of the total number of cases end up intubated in a hospital? If it's 1 in 100, it's a 1/10 of 1% fatality rate. Am I scared of that? No, not unless I'm medically compromised. And by the way, if you are, you have quite a bit to worry about with the regular seasonal flu. This is why they say, you should get a flu shot, even though I think it's bullshit. But maybe you ought to be thinking about a pneumonia vaccine, which is a separate thing you can get. Now that doesn't cover all of the different potential things. But secondary pneumonia is what kills a huge number of people. And again, what we're not sure of here, folks, because we just don't have the evidence yet, is whether or not there is direct attack going on, or whether most of these deaths, and this is a bad one, and there's no way we're going to get this out of the communists. All right, they're not going to tell us. And for those who think the WHO is not in their back pocket and is not basically either being locked out of the hospitals or not being honest, you're wrong. They absolutely are gaming everything. They are absolutely dependent upon these people, and they are sucking them off. But what we do not know is whether or not the people who are dying of this disease are dying as a consequence of secondary infections, or whether the virus is directly attacking their organs, causing a cytokine type of collapse. Okay, we just don't know that. And it's an important piece of information. I don't know whether we're ever going to get the truth on it, but it doesn't matter if 90, 95, 99% of the infections are mild enough that nobody even goes and seeks medical care. We don't know. And by the way, for those of you that think that 500,000 people infected in China is an absolutely astoundingly huge number, no, it's not. There's 1 billion people in the damn country. So 0.5% of the people got sick? What percent of the population, what percentage of the population in America gets the flu every year? Just saying, okay? I'm just pointing out that we have tens of thousands of people who die in the U.S. with a third of the population in China. They die every year of seasonal flu. Most of them from secondary complications, not the flu itself. Most of them die from pneumonia. Okay? And that seems to be the thing that's going on here when it kills people. But again, we don't have the data yet. On the other hand, I cannot argue with what I'm seeing in the statistics. Okay? And the two things I've got is that it looks like they may be achieving containment, although as soon as they all go back to work and drop the quarantines over there, I bet that goes away. They get another spike. Won't shock me in the least. Okay? The more important thing, though, is no breakouts in Western nations yet. Haven't seen one. The Chinese may be able to lie, and they will, and they do, and we all know that. All right, they're falsifying the numbers. We know this. But do you believe that every single country across the world, there's not one where somebody's going to tell the truth? Remember, in China, you tell the truth, you get disappeared, you end up in a gulag or worse. We know that that's happened to some reporters. How about over here? How about in Japan? How about in, Germany, Australia, France? All right, just saying. Are there likely to be outbreaks in certain parts of this country and in other nations? I'm really worried about the Asian continent in general. And we ought to be very concerned about the homeless populations and things like that in our major cities. It could turn into a real problem. However, I'm willing to bet, in order for them to get it, somebody that's infected has to go in there. And eventually it will happen. And when it does, it's probably going to be very bad very fast. All right. But for right now, don't have your hair on fire. It's not a good practice, and you're not going to get anywhere doing it. I'm your ticker guy, and that's where we are.